thank you for the invitation to come. I'm one of those who was on that march and just out there, and it's an incredible demonstration. I mean, really, really incredible. You know, when you see the kind of people who are marching together saying refugees welcome here. And for me, it's always interesting because I always campaign, and my background is also in the anti-racist movement. And we always say the hardest thing to fight for in this country is around refugee rights. If you want to fight against something that's uphill, it's around refugee rights. And then secondly, probably around climate. Now, for me, those were two of the hardest things to fight. But, you know, and when we think about what's been happening around the refugee crisis, you know, I mean, it's not new. I mean, last year, over 3,500 people died drowning in the Mediterranean. Earlier this year, we saw close to, they're saying over 2,000 people already dead. Huge amounts of people, nameless, faceless, black body bags washed up on the shores of Italy and Greece. And, you know, a response from our government and the European Union, you know, which was largely what? Well, we should prevent them. We should bomb their boats. We should target bombing of the smugglers' boats in Libya. You know, we shouldn't encourage them. Let's cut back on rescue boats. That was the narrative around that. And what has been incredible has been the outpouring of public solidarity and people's solidarity. I was in Germany last week, and it is incredible, absolutely incredible. People welcoming refugees at the train stations. 20,000 people went across the border from Austria to Hungary to drive refugees over the border because the Hungarians were preventing people from coming. Local Hungarian people standing on the motorways with food. I mean, incredible, where people way ahead of the politicians. Because what the politicians and the media done, they played the race card. They talked about this is the swarm. They talked about this is, you know, and everybody, not just in terms of the far right. You know, we saw mainstream politicians using exactly the same language. We've known this has always been the language in terms of fear. You know, we talk about the swarm of the immigrants, and we know it as somebody who was born in Pakistan, because it was used against us. It's been used against every wave of migrants. Of course, right back to the Jewish community in the 1930s, we've always been talked about as the fearful migrant. And above politicians, the hope has always come from people. And for me, that's a really important lesson for the climate movement. Because, as you heard earlier, I mean, this the refugee crisis that we hear about, or the migrant crisis, you know, it is a climate crisis. Because what we're seeing is we all know that the climate crisis is a crisis of all crises. It brings all of the issues together. So we know that in Syria, we've seen 5 years of droughts. Over 70% of all livestock have died. The Sahel, you know, which affects 15 million people, you know, has gone through its longest ever drought. So Pakistan, where 2 years ago, one flood affected 30 million people, where earlier this year, 3,000 people died from one single heat wave. You know, we've seen the typhoons in the Philippines, you know, super typhoons that were happening once every 100 years and now happening every single year with devastating impact. One tropical storm last week, Tropical Storm Erica, which hit Dominica, you know, killed 35 people, but it set back development in Dominica 20 years. 20 years from one this was not a super typhoon, this was not a hurricane, it was one tropical storm. So the impacts, as we know, all around the world are happening in terms of adverse weathers, the melting of the sea caps, and the impacts on our food production. So the reality of the climate impacts are there. And these are all at 0.8 degrees warming. These are not at the trigger warnings that we thought that they would be. So the level of urgency is out there. But I always wonder, you know, when we look back at now when we're running towards Paris, and we look back at what we did in terms of Copenhagen, what are the lessons that we should learn? Well, first of all, I think the biggest lesson is we have to start telling people the truth. I think for too long we don't tell people the truth. We hide it amongst ourselves. We think that we should know about the realities of the climate impacts, but other people shouldn't, because it scares people. Actually, I think being truthful is much more honest. I think we should be saying that 2 degrees is not enough. That having a 50-50 chance of meeting 2 degrees is not enough. Or like the UK Climate Change Act, having a 10% chance of meeting 2 degrees is not enough. That the impacts around the world require a much more urgent and ambitious action. We've got the EU talking about a 20% reduction target by 2020, which is already met 6 years before it needs to meet. It's talking about 40% target for 2030, which when you take in all the loopholes will mean just a 7% emission reduction target. When the Tyndall Centre says we would need to be at least at 80% by 2030 to have a chance of meeting the 2-degree target. And that's not even their fair share. I mean, the fair share of the UK or the EU would be countless. It would be in the 200% emission reduction. That's what actually developed countries need to be doing. If we're actually serious about tackling the climate crisis, protecting our food systems, bringing justice to people. So I think we have to recognise that. We have to recognise also that Paris is not going to save the planet. Paris is not going to be enough. They're already, politicians will tell you, well, the targets that are on the table are not going to meet the 2-degree target. Well, of course not. But they're not just not going to meet 2 degrees. They're going to lead us to 4 to 5 degree warming of the planet. That's the level of ambition that our government are putting forward. So that brings me to the second point. You know, why? Well, I think again, you know, there's this misguided belief that somehow one more briefing or one more report will make government act rationally. You know, that all it is about more advocacy. That's all we need. We need more advocacy. Well, actually, you know, we could fill every single building with the amount of reports and briefings on absolutely every single issue. And governments don't act rationally, and they're not acting rationally. Because actually they're not acting in our interest. And that also is important for us to start telling people as to why governments don't do what's needed to be done. Thirdly, I think we have to talk about power. You know, we don't have enough power, and the people who are blocking action, the vested interests, the powerful elites, they have much more power than us. And the only way we're going to be able to build more power is if we can engage more people. And we need to engage more people. How? Well, I don't think we engage people by talking about parts per million or 2 degrees or anything like that. I think those are language which actually only appeal to a small number of people. We have to start talking to people about issues that directly affect them. We talk about energy system, we talk about fracking, we talk about the dirty energy that impacts on people's lives, and we also talk about our energy solutions. We talk about food, things that relate to people, about changing our food systems and our food production. We talk about justice, because actually those are the principles, those are the things that, when we look at the refugee crisis, we look at the response of ordinary people, that's where the hope is. The hope is in solidarity and in justice. It's those values that are bringing people out, and that's what we've got to connect to. But of course, you can't just say it's all about despair, we need solutions. And the incredible thing is, we've got incredible solutions to absolutely every part of this. We have a solution to the energy crisis and how we consume and produce our energy. We've got solutions, there are better solutions, because we're able to bring warm homes for people. We're able to stop air pollution, which kills 29,000 people every year. We're able to tackle the fact that there's an inequality in our life expectancy, depending on where you are in London. These are incredible things that we can do as solutions are part of bringing our solutions out. Same in food. You know, we can feed the world 3 times over if we have an agroecology system. You know, we have to tackle the industrial food system that wastes 2/3 of the food that we produce or ships it from one part of the world to another part of the world. We don't need that. So we have to talk about the solutions that we've got and not just talk about the scare tactics in terms of saying it's only all really, really bad. We know that this government, which was elected as being one of the greenest governments ever, that thing, you've heard what it's done. It's been ripping up every single green regulation. It's attacking solar and it's attacking wind. It's attacking zero carbon homes. It's promoting fracking. All the things, and we know that every time we win, they change the rules. We know that when we win on planning, they go back and change the planning regulations. We know that from Heathrow yourself, your own experience, that when you win, they take it back and say, how do we win again? How do we come back onto all of these issues? And I think we have a lot to learn also from your campaigns, because I think the way that you fought as Heathrow campaigns, and saying no to Heathrow, is actually how you're going to win. Which is right, you have to connect local people. You have to connect local communities. You have to build that resilience of people. But also, you have to connect that to the global fights. And I have to say, I'm one of those people who work a lot with global movements all around the world. So I know when our communities are fighting against dirty energy projects in the Philippines and the South Africa, etc. And I'll tell you what, they all know about the Heathrow fights. When you win in Heathrow, they also think they're winning in terms of Heathrow. And that is also really important, that we've got to make our fights go local to global, so people can see the interconnectedness of our struggles. So people see that the reality of what we're fighting for isn't just this one abstract about is it a runway in Heathrow or a runway in Gatwick? It's actually no runway. Because if we want to save the planet, if we want to save people's lives, if
if we want to save people's livelihoods, that's the choice that should be being made, not about either Tweedledee or Tweedledum. There are opportunities for us now. Paris gives us an opportunity because politicians will talk about climate change. The media will talk about climate change. But we have to be able to build a movement. We have to use this moment to build a movement. So we have to think about who needs to be in this movement. What kind of people need to be in this movement? And I think that that needs to be a progressive alliance of people. We need to reach out to the trade unions. It's no good just us saying it's no dirty energy without genuinely talking about just transition and green jobs and climate jobs. It's no good about that because we're asking people to give up their lives and livelihoods. In the 1980s, I stood and spent a year campaigning for coal not dole, for the miners' strike. I know what the devastation of that result left in communities in the northwest and in Yorkshire. We know the realities of those, so people are not fooled if we as the Green Movement simply parrot that we're interested in just transition, but don't actually put ourselves and stand firmly with unions and with the labour movement. It also means we have to connect with justice organisations and talk also with diaspora communities, with the black community. For far too long we've been a white movement, a white middle class elite movement that talks to itself. Of course that's why we've been able to be disregarded. But again, you in Heathrow movement, I've been really impressed because I think there have been really great examples where you've broken that, where you've gone into local communities and done the grassroots work, which mean that actually as a movement and as a campaign, you have that local base of people. And I think that's the testament. That's the testament as to why Sadiq Khan says he's against the runway in Heathrow, and why Zach Goldsmith is saying that they're not saying it because they start from a position of principle. They're saying it because they know that there's a base of people there, there's a campaign there are campaigners like you there who've made them say no to Heathrow. And that's what we've got to do. So we've got to build. On October 9th and 10th, all around the world, there are people who connect their fights against dirty energy. We need to start to echo that and amplify that here in the UK. On November 29th, we'll be marching here in London. There'll be people marching all around the world on the 28th and 29th around climate. But we've got to go beyond talking about March on Climate. I think we've got to talk about we're marching for climate jobs, we're marching for climate justice, and we're marching, for action. We've got to talk about concrete elements. But we've not just got to think about Paris as in the Paris COP. Because the reality, as I said, is that Paris is not going to deliver what was needed. What's really important is what kind of movement will we be left with in 2016? And what will people understand is part and parcel of the climate fight? And I think what people need to understand in this country, and if we can do that, this will be a huge victory, is if we can say that the climate fight in this country means saying no to fracking, and it means saying no to airport expansion. If we're able to do that, that is what we've got to do in terms of raising people's consciousness and making those connections.